John Solomon from Just the News, your new book, Fallout, talking about the Russia collusion situation that the media is still trying to push this narrative. Does that surprise you?
It does not. I mean, even in the last few days, there were declassified documents from the FBI that show nine New York Times stories the FBI had determined were false about the Russia collusion story. When we see that level of misconduct in journalism, we can understand how this thing got out of control, how it went from a political opposition research project from a guy at MI6 who doesn't, by his own admission, said, I don't know if it was true when I gave it to the FBI, to a scandal because the American media kept pushing the same false facts time and time again. And that's how this country went through 3 years of unnecessary heartbreak.
Unnecessary. And the title Fallout, explain that.
Well, we want to play off the word nuclear because a lot of what we learned about the scandal was that its origins were in the desire of Hillary Clinton, Obama, Joe Biden to hide one of their biggest foreign policy failures in their term, and that was the reset, reboot with the Russian relationship. They came in 2009, shortly after George Bush left, shortly after Russia had invaded Georgia, the country of Georgia. And the Democrats came in haughty and said, we can change this. We'll give Vladimir Putin lots of gifts. He needs help with the economy. We'll give him billions of dollars with nuclear contracts. We'll let him buy the uranium under our soil, the Uranium One deal. We'll help him build his own Silicon Valley called Skokovo, right outside of Moscow. And we gave billions of dollars, untoward expertise, and we just gave it to the Russians with the idea they'll turn into nice guys. Kind of perestroika too, if you remember the Gorbachev years. Once Putin got everything he wanted, he pulled the carpet out from under Clinton, Biden, and Obama, and he invaded Ukraine. And then the Obama administration realized, wow, we have an international crisis, but we also have a lot to hide because during that period when we were cozying up, the Russians were given lots of things. They were giving Bill Clinton a $500,000 speech. They were giving millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. They were investing in John Podesta's company, millions of dollars in a company, clean energy company that John Podesta sat on the board. They were paying the chief energy advisor for Joe Biden money as for advice. And so they had not only a failed foreign policy, they had a trail of corruption and enrichment around the foreign policy failure. And so the fallout is that to cover that up, they set out on a mission to neutralize Russia as an issue in the 2016 campaign. They did so because Hillary Clinton did a poll in June of 2015. It's one of my favorite revelations in the book. My colleague Seamus Bruner found this document after we did some interviews. Of all the things that had happened in Hillary Clinton's life, the scandals, Whitewater, Rose Law Firm billing records, Vince Foster, the Benghazi tragedy, the email scandal, the number one thing that voters in this poll told Hillary Clinton would make them least likely to vote for them was the thought that she and Bill Clinton had traded on U.S. policy, got rich off of the Russia policy. 53% of people in the poll said that was the thing they most were concerned about Hillary Clinton. So she set in motion a opposition research project to neutralize Russia, scare off the Republicans, find something on the Republicans that'll leave Russia alone. And that's what gave us Christopher Steele, the FBI, and the entire investigation. So the fallout of the failed policy, nuclear mostly, is what caused all of this unnecessary scandal in the Trump administration.
I sense your frustration because you must feel like you've tried to tell the American people this story over and over again. What is the one thing that you feel like if it would just click for the entire American population, one thing, if you could just nail it home right now, what would that be?
The Clinton team set out to corrupt and use our intelligence community to carry out a political dirty trick. That's what it is. This is banana republic stuff. We live in a country where the FBI, the Justice Department, the courts are supposed to stay above politics, always be honest with us. And instead, the Clinton people walked in a false dossier and they helped the FBI carry out a political dirty trick of false information that maligned lots of people. Donald Trump, Carter Page, you can name them all, Mike Flynn. It was the first time in our American history where a political dirty trick, a political opposition project was essentially carried out by the intelligence community and the FBI. If we allow that to stand, if that becomes the new norm in America, we become a banana republic. We're no longer the constitutional republic that our extraordinary founding fathers gave us.
And when you talk to people out there in the world that don't know that you're necessarily John Solomon, what percentage of people believe that some part of Russia collusion happened?
It's a great question. We did a poll recently, and more than 60% of Americans said they believe something untoward went on at the FBI during the Russia collusion investigation. So a majority of Americans believe so. That means some Democrats and some independents have to get there to get to that number. I think the more facts come out, the more declassification occurs. First, the Democrats sink farther and farther away from their storylines. They no longer hold the line on Christopher Steele or any of those things. And the more Americans realize, we got sold a bill of bad goods and we were misled. The Congress was misled. The judge was misled in the FISA court. We want accountability. And I think the final chapter, if there's one more chapter of fallout, it's yet to be written. Will John Durham and Bill Barr hold those who carried this terrible misdeed out? Will he hold them accountable?
What does the president need to do to convince the American public? Here's all the evidence. You've written it. Just the news reports it every day. John, what does the president need to do to communicate this to the American public?
Gina, that's a great question. I think at this point, because the president is a victim of this caper, what really needs to be done in the end is a third party. A third party needs to validate. Democrats said this, Donald Trump said this. The evidence has been leaning Donald Trump's way for a long time. Someone arbitrarily has to say, this is what happened, and we are going to prosecute and punish and fire all those who carry this out. And John Durham's the perfect person because he comes from Connecticut, a blue state. He's a Democrat by registration, and he's a career prosecutor who really has no political leanings that we can tell in terms of his work. And so if someone like that, if a Democrat came out and said, that person doctored documents, that person lied to the court, that person lied to Congress, and they're all going to go to prison for it, the American people will finally have a resolution. It sometimes takes a third-party arbiter to get us all to feel comfortable where we are. The Americans now believe this story. The majority of Americans do, but I think the final chapter of accountability will cement it for President Trump. I don't think there's anything more that President Trump himself can do. He's made an impassioned case. He's got all the evidence out there. He declassified. It's time for the Justice Department to do its job.
John, there's safer work out there than this. I'm sure your wife has said that to you more than one time. You've been married 30-some years. Amazing track record here, but you could be doing a lot of things. Why this?
It's a great question. I've been an executive for most of my life since I was 21, 22 in the news industry. I've always insisted on continuing to report because I felt like if I can continue to do the artwork of the people that I'm managing, I'll be a better manager because I won't forget what it was like to be a reporter, what it was like to be a truth teller. So I have reported my whole career, no matter whether I was a CEO or a news editor. And it was odd for many of the jobs I was the first person to ever insist on doing that. It's part of my DNA. I'll be reporting until I can't pick up a pen anymore. I mean, that's in my DNA. I'll tell you one anecdote. I haven't talked much about this, not even in the book, but I think it's the anecdote that most reminds me of why I still stay in the game and write and report. It was in March of 2017. I really hadn't worked yet on the Russia scandal. The reason why? Most of my sources were telling me, it's not a scandal, it's not there, it's bogus, don't waste your time on it. But I'd just come off an episode of Sean Hannity, and it was March, and I just broke a big story that was not about Russia, but it was about FISA abuses. In the final moments of the Obama administration, the Justice Department came in and said, here are hundreds of violations we did under the FISA law. We were supposed to disclose these in real time. We forgot 5 years worth of violations. Big story, really raised concerns. I got out that night, and I drove out of the studio in Washington, drove home after being on Sean Stowe. Show was about 11 o'clock, and I pulled in my driveway, and there was a blue car with dim lights out sitting out in front of my driveway with U.S. government license plates on it. I pull in, I'm thinking, oh, God, am I in trouble now? And this is true when you talk about my wife. She looked out the window for a second. She saw the two guys approach me. She closed the shades and went back to bed and said, I'm not going to check that out. But they came up to say, are you Mr. Solomon? I said, yes, I am. And they said, we work for the government, and we want to let you know that the story you just reported on Sean Hannity, which you had on the website this morning, is the tip of a very large iceberg, and you need to drill through that iceberg and get to the bottom. I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought it was just some old FISA violations. And they said, no, it's a political dirty trick that was being carried out by our intelligence agencies. And if it's allowed to stand, the intelligence community as we know it will be corrupt. And these very powerful tools we have, FISA, surveillance, monitoring, electronic monitoring, will be used against our own citizens for political punishment rather than the intelligence tools that they were meant to be. Stop a terrorist attack, stop a counterintelligence threat. That's all they could tell me that night. And I remember I got home right away. I got into the house, went right down to my basement office. I typed out everything I could remember them telling me. I sent it to my good friend Sarah Carter, who was reporting with me at the time. And that's what set us on the way. People like that who care about their country so much that at 11 o'clock at night, they're going to show up at your home and try to lead you to the truth. That still inspires me as a reporter. It's why we wrote this book, ultimately. We don't want these dirty tricks or those whistleblowers to be let down.
Some say there aren't people like you anymore, at least not very many, that real journalism is dead. What has happened to journalism today, and can it be revived?
I think I would agree with a lot of the things that were in the Barry Weiss resignation letter at the New York Times this week. As our industry lost some of the pillars of its financial base, classified ads, traditional advertising, we got spooked. And so we're trying to figure out new business models in this crazy new internet era that we all live in. And when social media came along, a second thing happened. Everybody has opinions. Anyone who tells you they don't have opinions is not telling you the truth. We all have opinions. The journalist's job has always been to leave that opinion at the door threshold when you come in a room, when you start practicing journalism. Twitter took out the inner opinionator and empowered it in all these journalists. All of a sudden, they had opinions. And once they started to have opinions that were voiced in a public published realm, they felt comfortable trying to get from opinion to a final resolution. We're going to make our opinions come true. We lost our voice of neutrality. We lost our commitment to factual information, and we lost our commitment to get both sides of a story. And once that happened, the industry has gone down. You look at public polling, most news organizations have a popularity or favorability rating of between 50 and 20%. Most politicians would keel over with that rating. We go on, but we've lost our way, and I think we have to go back to truth, neutrality, accuracy, balance, and fairness. And when we get there, the American public will welcome us back in. And that's why we started Just the News. We're a throwback. We're like a Back to the Future organization. Sure, we got all the newfangled things of YouTube and social media and all those great things. But at the end of the day, we're doing journalism the way it used to be committed. And I hope more people follow in our shoes, and the young people that are working here, that they start a new generation of neutral journalism.
So your answer is yes.
Journalism is still good, but the industry has lost its way right now. That is my answer.
But your plan is to revive that.
Yes, absolutely. Think of all the great things in life that came from journalists. Big stories, Watergate, the Tuskegee experiment. We wouldn't have learned about these things were it not for courageous journalists. And the courage you show and all the things you've done in your life, you have to stand up and say, all this spin, all this silliness, at the end of the day, truth is truth, facts are facts. You need to look at these facts. And we've had our head in the sand in the industry for the last 5-10 years. The Trump presidency is probably the penultimate worst moment in this transition, but the pendulum will swing back. I'm confident of that.
The Russia story is sort of the gift that has just sort of kept on giving, or the curse, or I'm not sure how you word that. Is this going to be the last book on that topic?
It will be my last book on the topic, I hope. I think it's the penultimate chapter of this scandal. I think we tried to answer all the questions that were unanswered up to the point. When we started writing these stories and breaking them almost daily about Mike Flynn, Carter Page, a terrible victim in this, we were telling it episodically. So we stood back for a second and said, let's give everybody, sew it all together, but then answer the questions. And I think we answered a lot of them. There's one question that remains, one chapter that remains to be written, which is, will America punish the perpetrators who carried out this terrible misdeed? If they do, America is going to be strong for a long time. If they don't, the temptation of every political administration to use the FBI to punish their enemies will be the new norm in politics.
All right. The book is Fallout, and we're so proud of you for doing this. Thank you so
Gina.
much.
Really appreciate it.